My name's Kira Teeter, and I'm president of the Washington Conservation Guild. Thanks for joining us on this beautiful evening at Oak Hill Cemetery. So to begin, I'd like to thank Oak Hill Cemetery for hosting us, as well as WCG's 2024-2025 sponsors. This includes Diamond Level sponsor University Products, Silk Level sponsors Caring for Textiles, Click Netherfield, Gaylord Archival, and Small Corp, and Paper Level sponsor TrueView. The donations help WCG provide networking events, educational programming, honoraria for speakers, and free admission for WCG members to attend historic venue tours in the DC area, such as the Hillwood Museum tour that we hosted last month. In addition, we should also extend thanks to the Smithsonian National Collection Program, because although NCP is not a sponsor, they do provide annual support for WCG's Three Ring Circus that's held in January. Next slide, please. And I'd also like to take a moment to announce the 2024-2025 Williston awardees. This year we have Allison Craigie, Vudo, Charlotte Starnes, and Sarah Fong. And we will have short bios going up on the website soon. So if you want to learn more about them and see them at future meetings, feel free to tell them congratulations. So in addition to receiving 1 year free membership to WCG, they will also have reduced registration fees for WCG workshops, including the private practice seminar that we're having next month on Saturday, November 16th, and reimbursement for 1 year of membership to the American Institute for Conservation. So congratulations to the four of them. And then with that, I will pass the microphone to Pam Kirshner to introduce tonight's speaker.
Thank you and welcome everyone. I'd like to introduce to you Laura Thoms. Laura Thoms is a native Washingtonian who moved back to DC in 2021. She is a graduate of Sarah Lawrence College. She studied book structures, paper making, and letterpress at the University of Iowa Center for the Book, and archives and library science at Rutgers. She has worked in the collections of the Harry Ransom Center, the Hamilton Type Museum, the archives of the Big Bend, and the Chinati Foundation. She also spent 5 years as a development officer for the University of Texas at Austin's West Texas Astronomical Observatory, the McDonald Observatory. Before joining Oak Hill Cemetery full-time in 2023, she worked in the General Collections Conservation section of the Conservation Division in the Preservation Directorate at the Library of Congress. She is an avid letterpress printer who prints at Pyramid Atlantic and in the summers at Tipoteca Italiano in Italy. Her letterpress work has appeared in Bon Appetit, HGTV, HOW Design Magazine, and the Communication Arts Typography Annual. Her efforts at Oak Hill have led to a 2023 FAIC Collections Assessment for Preservation, 2023 accreditation as a Level 1 Arboretum, a 2024 NEH Preservation Assistance Grant, and a 2024 tour and reading by Lincoln in the Bardo, author George Saunders, whose work takes place in the Oak Hill grounds. Laura?
Hi. I would like to start by thanking the Oak Hill Cemetery Historic Preservation Foundation Board and Oak Hill Superintendent Paul Williams for their support of this archival project. Tonight's talk about the creation of the Oak Hill Cemetery Archive is going to be a little bit different from the more technical talks usually presented at Guild meetings. Many of you work in established collections and do not interact with the fundraising side of your organization. However, this talk might be relevant if you consult with under-resourced collections or want to think creatively about ways to fund new initiatives in your organization using assessments and data that you already regularly track. If nothing else, I hope it's an insightful look at the development of a new collection. Tonight I will talk about the steps of creating an archive from an unmanaged collection, getting assessments, establishing a standard of care, creating foundational collection plans, documenting provenance, building a network, and applying for funding and accreditation, and the results of these activities. Though I have worked in libraries and special collections most of my career, I was a fundraiser for an astronomical observatory in West Texas for 5 years. When I was in West Texas, I also worked with some under-resourced collections and learned how they extended their care with consultants and federal funding. When I was in grad school for archives, I said that my dream job would be one where I could care for a collection, advocate for it, and raise funds for its care. Who knew that dream job would be in a cemetery? I started to work at Oak Hill because I live a few blocks away and frequently walked here and got to know the staff. I became their weekend host in October 2021, while I still worked in the General Collection Conservation section at the Library of Congress. I became a full-time employee of Oak Hill in January 2023 when they decided to move forward with starting an archive. First, some history about Oak Hill. In a city rich in historic cemeteries, Oak Hill holds unique challenges and opportunities for preservation and as a cultural heritage site and emerging museum. Across its built and natural landscape, Oak Hill also embodies the diverse environmental, artistic, and social concerns common to the rural cemetery. Unlike many other types of cultural collections, this includes the historical and current stewardship of urban woodlands and green spaces as part of our wild and designed landscapes, the documentation and conservation of endangered artworks and structures, and the documents related to their creation, such as blueprints, planning plans, and installation records, and the shifting perceptions of cemeteries as keepers of both family and community memory, and the impacts of new modes of cultural expression, evolving technologies, and ideas of access, interpretation, and public participation in storytelling. These are some 1860s images of Oak Hill. You'll notice that the gatehouse is only 2 stories in this picture. Oak Hill is a 22-acre historic garden cemetery planned by George de la Roche in 1850 on land donated by William Corcoran, with structures designed by James Renwick, Thomas Hugh Walter, and George Hadfield, and once had a St. Gaudens sculpture. Founded in 1849 by an act of Congress, Oak Hill has never had a cultural heritage professional at the helm in the past 175 years. Mostly our superintendents have been grounds managers, which has contributed to all of our historic records, plans, maps, maintenance records, all being collected in a mishmash of general business records and maintenance folders, with many of our original plans lost, and reactive fixes to our structures without assessment of the materials or a long-term preservation plan. This is a map of the Oak Hill grounds. Oak Hill was fortunate to have former Congressional Cemetery Superintendent Paul Williams become our superintendent in 2021. Paul has a degree in historic preservation and understands the value of preservation site-wide. Oak Hill is still a working cemetery. Anyone can be buried here. Funds from lot sales support maintenance and preservation projects. Funds are also raised by donations to the nonprofit Oak Hill Cemetery Preservation Foundation, started in 2009. A goal of the Preservation Foundation is for Oak Hill to become a museum, to extend the care of the site when cemetery lot sales have been exhausted. We asserted that creating an archive, an organized and searchable record of the history, provenance, makers, and landscape of Oak Hill was an essential part of this process, as were expert assessments of our institutional readiness. Why a cemetery archive? What do we know about Oak Hill? Provenance and historical documentation verify what we know about Oak Hill and its residents, and the people who designed its landscape and structures. This has a value to staff. We can better care and plan for our historic site, knowing the provenance and history of Oak Hill. Having improved searchability and better intellectual control over sensitive documents helps us, and having a place to document and track the historic buildings and landscape also helps us. The value to the public is that an education and exhibition program can be started. Having improved accessibility with digitization and organized and searchable family stories, as well as stories of workers, craftspeople, and history, helps inspire research. Pictured here is a 1900s notice of regulations for visiting the grounds. Professional assessment. The Oak Hill staff consists of 9 people, 6 of whom are groundspeople. The gatehouse is the superintendent's home, but also houses one office shared by 2 people and a vault with almost all of our records in it. There were no records or collection staff before I started. When we began this project, we knew that we would need a lot of help with the collection, with the shift in thinking, instituting a standard of care, and in allocating resources to collection management, and also exploring diverse funding streams to support the work. In my first month, we applied for a map assessment, a cap assessment, and began working with collections preservation consultant Wendy Jessup to monitor our storage environment. We installed hobo data loggers in the vault and gatehouse, purchased eClimate notebook, and ordered rehousing materials. Pictured here is preservation architect Jessica Sanker during our 2023 cap assessment. In order to better understand the relationship of Oak Hill the business to Oak Hill the Historic Preservation Foundation nonprofit, and prepare our staff and boards for standards of care and core documents required for museum accreditation, we underwent a 1-year museum assessment program, or MAP, for organizations supervised by the American Alliance of Museums. Our assessor was Kara Seichek from the Smithsonian. It was so helpful for us to commit as an organization to preservation planning rather than reactive fixes, the need to implement organized data reporting and documentation, and to discuss organizational charts and growth with boards and staff who in the past often have been related to or married to each other. This also resulted in updates to our Preservation Foundation mission and strategic plans. Pictured here is another 1900 sign regarding rules to illustrate how it is the board communicates our mission and ethics to the public. Now to the good stuff. Collection conditions. As the weekend host, I filed records and responded to research requests for a year. I quickly discovered that there were important documents starting in the 1850s in our business files. The business files were stored in a somewhat damp vault in the gatehouse. Historic documents, maps, blueprints, correspondence were all smashed in with loose photographs, newspaper clippings, ephemera, and business records. You can see folded architectural plans in this photo. The vault door remained open during business hours. Staff were in and out of the vault all day. Files were freely shared with the public, and no tracking was done of the records used and by whom. Here are some issues. This photo on the right is a really interesting book that we have that is one of our original contract books, and in it is glued letters and contracts that almost operate like a scrapbook of a lot of historic families. We were one of 54 institutions chosen for a 2023 FAIC Collections Assessment for Preservation. CAP provides funding and a list of recommended assessors to come for a 2-day site visit and write a report about collection conditions as well as building and environmental conditions. Our assessors were Amelia Parks from the Library of Congress and J&M Preservation from Philadelphia. During our assessment, we discovered 38 extra boxes of material that had been in off-site storage with no inventory list. As you can see from the pictures, there was so much tape. There were foam core signs wrapped in trash bags, secured with bungee cords. Dried mold on some of the boxes suggested that they had been stored in the wet basement of the gatehouse at one point. I was really glad to have conservators Wendy and Amelia with me. There were some treasures in pretty good condition in those 38 boxes. On the left is an original 1800s ledger of what we paid people, from everything from selling flowers to erecting monuments, to digging graves. It's a great record of who worked here and what we were doing at that time. In the center is our original board minutes from 1849 onwards. In this photo, it's a whole writing about who is allowed at Oak Hill. So can school groups come in? Are we open on Sundays? It's really wonderful to see the thinking behind that planning. And on the right is one of my favorite ledgers that we found. This is a logbook of everyone who worked here. Unfortunately, it starts in 1873. I would have liked it to be a little earlier. But it is our gatekeepers, our gardeners, and even incidental workers like carpenters and masons. A lot of the provenance of things here might be in that ledger. Though we had initially planned around preserving a paper-based collection, we soon realized that the documentation, preservation, treatment records, emergency planning, and environmental monitoring that we used for the archive also should include all of the trees, all of the monuments and buildings, and all of their related documents. Previously, these documents were in 3 separate locations on site, mostly related to building or the specific grounds or building crews that worked on these projects. We were accredited as an arboretum in 2023 by the Morton Arboretum ArbNet program. A massive storm in summer 2023 took out more than 40 of our oldest trees and made us realize how vital it was to document our historic landscape. Climate readiness did not just apply to our buildings. The photo on the right is ecological historian Michael Gage, who is writing a significant tree report for us this year, documenting all of our oldest trees and the trees that still remain from our pre-cemetery landscape. The CAP collection assessment recommended that our first priority should be writing core documents like collection and emergency plans. We needed to decide what items are archives and how materials enter the archives. It recommended a full inventory and rehousing of material. It also recommended greater security protocols for our collection. The building assessment found that our collection mostly stayed in range in terms of recommended temperature and humidity, but the vault envelope was permeable, showing large fluctuations when the door was closed. A flat roof that pools water over the vault also needs to be addressed. We used our assessments for funding. We received our 80-page CAP report in the fall of 2023. We immediately used its recommendations to ask the Preservation Board to lease an additional space to better store the collection, process and rehouse items, and host researchers. There are now desks and offices to write the collection plan, store rehousing, cleaning, and emergency response materials, and for interns and consultants to work. We used our CAP report for an NEH Preservation Assistance Grant, which we were awarded in August 2024. We used our assessments for care. By undergoing a MAP assessment with our board, they better understood the standard of care required for museum accreditation. In our 2024-2025 budget, we were able to fund ongoing archival initiatives, as well as extend the reach of conservation assessments to our first site-wide architectural assessment of our top 5 architecturally significant structures, as well as commissioning a historic tree report. Archive materials supported these assessments, and the archive became a place to track what we learned. We will use this data for provenance, as well as for order of magnitude care plans, budgeting, and grant applications. Pictured here is stained glass conservator Julie Sloan assessing our chapel windows. We extended our conservation care with professional consultants and collaborations with preservation organizations. The picture on the left is our conservators doing the site-wide assessment, led by our CAP assessor, Jessica Senker. We brought her back for our building assessment this year. They're doing material analysis on the Thomas E. Walter marble Corcoran Mausoleum. On the right is a recent volunteer cleaning day from the Association for Preservation Technology. Building our networks of preservation experts and engaging professional preservation organizations has improved our resources exponentially. Using assessments for growth. Our assessments and accreditations allowed us to share what we know with our peer institutions and increase the research and scholarly visits. For example, in January 2024, Dumbarton Oaks brought a cohort of Harvard Landscape Studies graduate students to discuss our pre- and post-colonial landscape. Community impact. Our new Arboretum status and organized landscape records facilitated collaboration with other environmental stewards on the Rock Creek Park corridor. In this photo, Sue Paste from the Morton Arboretum meets with Georgina Owen, director of the Friends of Montrose Park, after a tour of both of our grounds. Having organized and searchable records also improved family genealogy research, scholarly research, and historic architectural tours. Humanities impact. Having a collection to visit and better knowledge of our site inspired a visit from Lincoln in the Bardo author George Saunders in summer 2023. His book takes place on our grounds and is our #1 tourist draw. He donated to the archives an essay about writing Lincoln in the Bardo and a map of what he thought our grounds looked like while he was writing the book. He came back in spring of 2024 to lead a tour of our grounds and to give a talk in this chapel. The archives have been working with Saunders and composer Missy Mazzoli on research related to the Met-commissioned opera of Lincoln in the Bardo that will premiere in 2026. This is just a timeline to say it was amazing how quickly things got done once we got going. Satisfying to make a slide like that. Future goals. As a result of this project, Oak Hill will address collection storage conditions, handling and use, the creation of preservation guidelines, processes and plans, and support the needs of a future exhibition program and museum accreditation. This project increases physical and intellectual control and management of the collection. It will build and iteratively test and refine policies and procedures that support and give value along the entire preservation life cycle. This project sets up a model for adding records to existing holdings and future additions to the collection. Though the building and landscape reports have been commissioned for preservation care projects, they are also foundational documents for these emerging sections of the archive. We still have some ongoing challenges. #1 is staffing and space. Oak Hill is also not ADA compliant. We're working on all of these things. We are also still learning about the relationship between Oak Hill the business and Oak Hill the Historic Preservation Foundation nonprofit, where we intersect, where we diverge, and how to align priorities and growth for both and support each other's activities. I'll conclude Sorry about this slide, it's so bad. I will conclude this talk by sharing some of my favorite discoveries from the last year. As a result of this archival project, this document came back into our collection in a digital form. It's an 1869 letter from Anne Cunningham at Mount Vernon to William Corcoran regarding his request for a magnolia sapling from the seed planted by George Washington at Mount Vernon for his sacred site at Oak Hill. There's still a magnolia tree next to his site today. This is Ellen Lamott. So much of the history we share about Oak Hill is about notable founding fathers or soldiers. Ellen Lamott was a suffragist, a World War I nurse. She wrote a famous anti-war book that was banned in the US and was close friends with Gertrude Stein. She eventually lived in Georgetown with her partner, Emily Crane Chadbourne, and at least one exotic bird. I've talked to some of you all who are touring the grounds about this, but this is the Bell family. Some of the earliest images we have of the Oak Hill grounds come from Bell & Brothers Studios. All of the members of that studio are buried at Oak Hill. An 1862 daguerreotype of Nephi Bell is embedded in his monument here. Youngest brother Charles, who's in that top picture, left Bell & Brothers Studios in 1873 and started C.M. Bell Studios, becoming one of the most famous portrait photographers in D.C. The Library of Congress holds a collection of over 30,000 of his images. We hosted a talk from the Library of Congress about the Bells in historic DC photography a few weeks ago. This is an 1851 map that is at a weird angle because I couldn't get above it. Due to a leaky air conditioning, we just discovered this 1851 map of our grounds in a frame behind a copy of the same image. This map may be an early lithograph or salted paper map. It was drawn by Francis Sinclair Barberin before he became the second director of the Corcoran Museum in 1874. My final slide. Why Dua Lipa? Well, it turns out that she has a podcast and a book club on her Service 95 site, and she's chosen Lincoln and the Bardo as their October book. For the last few weeks, our archive has been working on a research request for Service 95 and George Saunders for historic and modern photos of Oak Hill and some of our documents for them to use for their book club materials. You never know. We hope you will come, take a walk at Oak Hill, research your family, research your favorite historic figure or your favorite craftspeople, enjoy the historic landscape, and continue to follow this project. Maybe even consult on conservation of our paper records, the Bell daguerreotype, or that 1851 map. Please contact me if you want a closer look at the archive or would like to brainstorm about assessments or funding, or just take a walk with me here. Thank you. Yeah.
First of all, thank you so much, Laura. That was amazing. It's quite an undertaking. And how quickly you've been able to...
3 years, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing.
We get a lot of support. I mean, everybody here was ready to do this. They just didn't know how to do this.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
My question, though, is what is a tree report? Yeah.
Okay, so Michael Gage is an ecological tree historian, and he writes, I can share one with you, but he writes these very detailed reports. When he studied landscape studies, he knows how to read the landscape. I met him because he did a lecture on wolf trees at Dumbarton Oaks.
Cool.
So if you don't know what those are, they're the giant trees that are in the middle of woods that suggest that the land had been cleared and farmed at some point. The trees got really big, and then the farming stopped and the forest came back. So after going to his talk, I was just inspired by his work, and he was nice enough to come here the next day and walk the grounds with me and we wanted to see if there were any trees here that predated the cemetery. And unfortunately, in those slides of some of the trees we lost, both of those trees in the picture were trees that predated the cemetery that are no longer here. But this is actually goes to show you why we need to do a report like this. These are finite resources, and we have to document them, or we lose that knowledge forever. The tree report, he uses historic maps. So those of you who work in historic map collections, I may be calling on you soon. He uses historic maps. He reads the landscape, takes information about the trees that are still here, and he'll also be looking at our historic photographs. So even in that first slide, or second slide, where I showed you those 1860s photographs, he'll be able to look at those photos and see if any of those same trees are here.
Very cool.
Yeah, and he does more. There's like geology, there's a lot of scientific data that I'm skipping over, but he helps large arboretum style sites understand what is native, what their land might have been before. So obviously you can look at our 1851 map closely, but in 1851, our site ended right after this chapel. We didn't go much further, and we didn't acquire the next 10 acres until 1865 and 67, and most of that was forest. It was owned by Evermay, the estate next to us, and it included their family burial ground that kind of came in the sale to us. But then most of that was pasture land, or I guess we don't actually need to look at that anymore. Was either pasture land or just forested land. So we have some photos of our grounds right after we purchased that land, and we cleared a lot of it, but some of the trees remained. And if you want to see it, that's something you can then make an appointment at the archive, and I can share that data with you, and we can share it with the other sites that are all along the Rock Creek corridor. Any other questions? Yes.
You mentioned that this is still an active cemetery and it still has active plots. Is there any projections about what year the cemetery will fill up and no longer be an active area?
I am going to send that question back to Paul, our superintendent, but just know that Paul is a genius in arranging space here, and every time we do a restoration project, say, of our roads, they might narrow that road a little bit so we can put more vaults in. Everything here is vaulted, so if you're buried in a casket, it's usually one on top of the other in a vault. And that helps us also with some of our erosion issues. But Paul, when do you think we'll run out of space?
Good question. We have a great ground crew out there that knows and creates new real estate for me, which is really important in a 175-year-old cemetery. So we can take away a path like this that's in asphalt out there and create 20 new casket sites that I can sell for $75,000 a piece. So we're an expensive cemetery, but no one's going down that path right now anyway because it is you can't walk down it. And we'll either recreate it into casket space, cremation space, or a grassy knoll, if you will. And then we could do a kind of traditional cemetery. So we currently have 800 spaces out there right now worth about $50 million. So I'm thinking we have a good 100 years left until we start using up all of our paths.
And when we're talking about how expensive it is, I also want to just put in that less expensive option is being a memorial tree, which is what I want to be here.
I can scatter you in the woods and Rock Creek for $500. So it starts at $500 and it goes up to $750,000. So that's your rate.
But this is also interesting intersection comes between what do we fund, how do we fund, and part of the reason why we've been going down the route of federal grants is that extends that time we have. And it also kind of raises our standard of care here. It forces us to work on certain deadlines or work with people who have done this sort of work before. And it's helpful for us, as well as, maybe raising the profile of the work we do and allowing us to work with some people that maybe in other ways we couldn't have afforded. So it's a win all around. Yes.
I guess back to that space management
Yeah.
question. With this being an arboretum and a cemetery, how are preserving the trees that you can put in with creating various sites?
I'm going to talk to Paul a little bit. Throw that back to Paul in a second, but I will tell you some things about that. We have to be careful of the trees getting very old because of them falling on our other finite resource, the monuments here or our buildings. We've had trees fall on the chapel. But in working with people like Michael and other landscape people, it's not the most aesthetically pleasing thing, but you can trim trees and keep them for a longer time. Some of you who may have walked in the east part of our cemetery would have seen those 2 beech trees that got snapped in half in the storms. And we kept them because there are owls and other animals living in them. So it's a balance, I think, and Paul could talk to you more about how he knows where the roots of the trees are and how vaulting maybe helps with the management of those tree roots.
Yes, perfect, Laura. It is a balance. The trees are living things. So we do have memorial trees here, and we move like little memorial markers back as the tree grows. But then again, a derecho can come through and take away that tree. So it's a fine balance with that. And Laura alluded that we had some amazingly healthy trees that just exploded during this derecho. I think it was a tornado, but it's a derecho apparently, where their branches were 100 feet away from the trees. It wasn't just trees falling down, they just exploded. So we had that situation, which Laura also mentioned tipped over 250 headstones too. So it's a fine balance in the cemetery with trees, canopy, and whatnot. With all that said, really quickly, we're going to have Casey Trees plant 100 new trees here this December and January. So we're going to kind of try to replace a lot of that canopy, but it's a constant yin and yang with trees, cemeteries, and managing what I call a 20-acre house.
Great. Thank you so much, Laura. I think we need to end where it's past 7, but thank you all for coming. We appreciate you. Thank you.